Hello and welcome to another episode of BariAftercare, the podcast. And I'm excited to pick up where we left off last week when we talked about intuitive eating. And if you remember, I said I think intuitive eating is a great way to live life in theory, but I have some reservations about intuitive eating for post-ops, especially those in the first couple of years after a bariatric surgical procedure. So I had a listener send me a question and I thought, oh my goodness, I need to go into a little bit more detail because she said, could you tell me what intuitive eating is? Which let me know that we had forgotten to even define intuitive eating. And because it is such a popular topic, not just in the bariatric world, but specifically in the bariatric world, I even know a program that has a support group every month based on the topic of intuitive eating, that I wanted to go into more detail and explain what intuitive eating is. Again, I'll share some of my reservations about using intuitive eating early on as a post-op, but you got to make up your own mind because for some people this will be an amazing way of eating, and for others it may be an amazing way of eating down the line, and still for others you may be like, you know what? I'm going to start aiming for that right now. So I'm going to use the same book that Shea and I used last week, and that was with Shea Quinn, who is a new member of the BariAftercare support team. So she'll be doing a lot more in the full BariAftercare program. And if you're not a member of the full BariAftercare program, I encourage you to do so. And you can find out more information about that at www.BariAftercare.com. But the book we were using is called Intuitive Eating, a Revolutionary Anti-Diet Approach, and it's written by Evelyn Tribole, Tribole, and Elyse Resch, Lesch, and this is the 4th edition of their book. So I'm using the book as I talk about today's topic, the 10 principles of intuitive eating, a detailed description. So the information that I'm going to be sharing with you is primarily from this book. I'll let you know when I'm sharing my own opinion. So what I'm going to do is give a good explanation of what intuitive eating actually is as defined by these authors and what they say about dieting and how dieting oftentimes results in physical and emotional problems. And I agree very much with that. I think dieting has caused a lot of our listeners a lot of problems. So we'll go into the details about that. Then we're going to talk about those 10 principles of intuitive eating and kind of wrap up with a summary. And again, as with everything I share on the podcast, it's up to you to make up your own mind what fits for you in what I say and what doesn't. What fits for you as pertaining to the information I share with you by other authors or other researchers. You know, the bottom line is it's up to you. And the other thing that is very, very true is there is not one way, and we all know that, for people to develop a healthy lifestyle that includes living at a healthy weight for your body. And my definition, this is me, my definition of a healthy weight for your body is where you're able to do the kinds of things that you want to do in your life while minimizing, to the extent that you have control to do so, the kinds of health issues that you may face, because excess weight typically causes comorbid health issues. So a healthy weight for your body doesn't have much to do, in my mind, with the number on the scale and the height and weight thing, or BMI. So there you have that. So you got to make your own decisions. I'm presenting some information, and I think it's great information. So let's get started. Again, this information is from Intuitive Eating, a Revolutionary Anti-Diet Approach by Evelyn Tribole and Elyse Resch, 4th edition. So what is this intuitive eating that we've been talking about? Well, there are 3 key features of intuitive eating, and these have been researched, and the authors are great about including the research that promotes this intuitive eating lifestyle. And the three key features of intuitive eating are, first of all, a person has unconditional permission to eat when they're hungry and to eat what food they desire. Okay, that is the first thing. Unconditional permission to eat when hungry. Keep that in mind. And to eat what food is desired. The second feature of intuitive eating is eating for physical rather than emotional reasons. Very big thing here. We don't want to be emotional eaters. We want to eat because your body says you're hungry and needs nutrition. And thirdly, relying on internal hunger and satiety cues to determine when and how much to eat. So theoretically, this is amazing. I love this. It's like, okay, I'm going to eat because I'm hungry. My body is telling me that I'm hungry, and I'm going to eat what I want just until the point that I'm satisfied. And I'm going to eat for the physical reasons and not because of emotional reasons. I think this is how we are all born. I think this, and that is why I believe it's called intuitive. We rely on our body to let us know when we're hungry and what we're hungry for. Now, there's this big fancy word that the authors explain because it's a big part of this intuitive eating process. And I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing this right, but the word is, or the phrase is, interoceptive or interoceptive, interoceptive, interoceptive awareness. So interoceptive awareness is your ability to be able to tell from sensations that arise in your body when you're hungry. And that's when it comes to eating, but it's bigger than that. It's being able to listen to your body and pay attention to your physical sensations and know what that is telling you about what you need or what you want. It's a direct experience. You feel it within your body and it's in the present moment. It's not the past. It's not out there somewhere in the future. It's right now. So you might feel the grumblings in your tummy, or you might feel some hunger pains, or you might feel blood sugar off a little bit. But other examples that have nothing to do with eating are when you have a full bladder. You can kind of feel it. And hunger and satiety, meaning I'm satisfied, I'm full enough, not stuffed, but that is a physiological experience. So when you're hungry, you should be able to feel it. When you're satisfied, you should know that you've had enough. Now, I think that people lose these sensory observations or awarenesses over time. And if that's you, if you're like, I can't even tell when I'm hungry, I don't know when I've had enough to eat because I always eat until I'm stuffed, then this is something that you're going to have to learn and get used to. And that is part of the process of becoming an intuitive eater. So if you're not there right now, don't worry. It doesn't mean you can never be an intuitive eater. But that's what this whole system is based on. Learning to know and trust your hunger signals and know and trust when you're satisfied. Now, the authors are smart because they say the challenge, because we have a diet culture in our society, is that a lot of people, first of all, they don't value, and secondly, they don't trust their own body's sensations. So they may have them, but they're like, I don't care, I'm going to eat anyway. I'm not at all hungry, but I think this sounds good. And a lot of people don't even trust. It's like, is that hunger? Or when they get that, okay, I've had enough, they ignore it either willfully or they're not aware of it. So what the authors are saying is that people oftentimes base their eating experiences on what they refer to as externality. So we eat according to maybe diet rules that we've set up for ourselves or diet plans. And this can create a lot of confusion between the mind and the body. I know that my diet plan says I eat this. I'm not really hungry. So should I eat it or shouldn't I? You know, it gets really confusing. And I have to stop eating at this time of day if I'm on this sort of diet. But my body's saying I'm hungry. So we're ignoring these interoceptive awareness cues, this inner sensation. That's an inside job. But we base a lot of, especially if you do a lot of dieting, according to the authors, based on rules, based on things that have nothing to do with our body and what it's telling us. Now here I thought this was interesting. This comes from the authors, and I think it's a pretty lofty claim, but I'm going to tell you what the general benefits of intuitive eating, according to the authors, include. Greater body appreciation and satisfaction. Really a beautiful thing. I love that. Positive emotional functioning. I have questions about that. Greater life satisfaction. Unconditional self-regard and optimism. Psychological hardiness. The humming is my questioning these things, right? Greater motivation to exercise when focus is on enjoyment rather than guilt or appearance. Those are the general benefits of intuitive eating according to the authors. Now my is because, okay, there may be some positive emotional functioning because you're eating intuitively. There could be some greater life satisfaction. Unconditional self-regard and optimism, that seems really, really lofty to me based on a form of eating, a style of eating. I don't know, but unconditional self-regard, I'm not sure if I know any human being on the planet that has unconditional self-regard. Just saying. Psychological hardiness, well, let's talk about the rest of your life and what's happened and what's going on in your life at this point and in the past. I don't know if intuitive eating is going to result in psychological hardiness, like I got it all together. That's how I'm reading it. So I think these benefits of intuitive eating are far-fetched, but I do agree that you probably have greater body appreciation and satisfaction. So I differ a little bit with the authors because I think that that is very broad-based, and I don't know that any one thing on the planet can result in all of those things completely. However, back to what they say, the main purpose of intuitive eating, back to the book and the authors. I like this a lot, by the way, is to cultivate a healthy relationship with food, with your mind, and with your body. Really great goals. I love that. And if you can obtain that with intuitive eating, which I think you probably can, I think that is a wonderful purpose and a wonderful goal. So intuitive eating, they say, is a weight-neutral method, meaning that the focus is not on body size, but rather on healing your relationship with food. I totally love that. Absolutely love that component, that goal, and that is the main purpose. So in that regard, I am all about intuitive eating. And I think that everyone on the planet who has been affected by diet culture and societal pressures and norms to look a certain way would benefit from this. So I think that the main purpose of intuitive eating is remarkable. So they go on to cite some research, and we're going to get into a little bit about how dieting has affected people here, but we're going to ease into that. But one of the things they say, and I think this is true as well, and this is some research that they include in their book. They didn't do this research. It's by O'Hara and Taylor, and it was done in 2018. And it says, one of the strongest predictors of weight gain is dieting, regardless of the actual body weight of the dieter. And I think that is probably a very true statement, right? A very strong predictor of weight gain is dieting. And think about your past. If you're listening to this podcast, then think about your history with weight loss and weight gain. And a lot of times, people gain weight because they're chronic dieters. So the authors say that the intuitive eating principles that we're going to go over, these 10 principles, work by either increasing your interoceptive awareness. I'm more aware of when my body feels hungry, and I'm more aware of when I feel satisfied, or by removing the obstacles to knowing this information. So I'm either going to become more in tune with my body or, I'm going to say or, by becoming aware of and removing the obstacles to paying attention to my body. And a lot of that is related to the rules set up by dieting. So again, that interoceptive awareness is your body's ability to perceive sensations from within your body. I'm full, I have to go to the bathroom, I'm going to sneeze, I feel this coming on, the yawning. So it's a direct experience. Your body feels it in the moment. All right. The challenge, they say, is because we have this huge diet culture in our country. And again, people aren't trusting their bodies. So we're going to go into that predictor of weight gain, which is dieting, and I'm going to go straight to the book and start with the first principle of, intuitive eating. And the first principle, and I personally love this, is to reject the diet mentality. So here the authors say that if you allow, and I'm reading directly from the book, if you allow even one small hope to linger that a new and better diet or a new and better food plan might be lurking around the corner, it's going to prevent you from being free to rediscover intuitive eating. Okay, so the first principle is throw out the diet mentality. While I love this and am all about it and think the diet culture has been nothing but damaging to people, I'm not sure that early on in your post-op experience, this is going to be 100% possible. I do think it's worth working toward. The problem is that people have years and years and years and maybe decades, because maybe you were a kid and the family or mom or the aunt or the sister or the dad was all about one diet after another. And not only did they diet, but they drug you along with their diets. So maybe the diet mentality has been part of your life for so long. A snap of the fingers or okay, I'm rejecting diet mentality may or may not work, but it is definitely worth working toward. So I love this first principle. And along with this idea of rejecting the diet mentality, the authors do a really good job of noting some fears and then their reality, what they say is reality related to these fears. So a lot of people fear, if I stop dieting, I won't stop eating. In other words, these diets that have restricted certain categories of foods or restricted certain times of day, these diets that allow only this kind of food, if I let go of that, I'm going to eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and I'll never stop eating. That's a valid fear for a lot of people because they've been so constrained by these diets they've been on, one after the other. The authors say that the reality is that dieting is often the trigger for overeating. I don't disagree with that. I think that that's probably true because you have that, I'm on a diet, I can't do this. And so when you do eat something you want to eat, you overeat it. So I think there's some validity to that. Another fear for people who have been in the diet mentality and lived in the diet culture for a long time is, I don't know how to eat when I'm not dieting or following an eating plan. Absolutely true. From what I've experienced in 20 years of working with this population, that is absolutely the truth. I don't know how to eat when I'm not dieting or following an eating plan. The reality, according to the authors, say when you banish food plans, get rid of all the food plans, and become an intuitive eater, you'll be eating in response to inner signals, which will guide your eating. And I think that is true eventually. If you feel like you've lost your sense of I'm hungry and I'm full, then it may take a while for you to become really aware of that. And then again, there are a lot of people who talk about constantly being hungry. And as you know, there are a lot of different physiologies that go along with all the different people in the world. And some people have different hormone levels, and those hormones may be increasing their appetite, while other people may have a different set of hormone levels and they rarely feel hungry. So if we were all built to specification, like all of our bodies have just the right amounts of this chemistry and that chemical and that neurotransmitter and that whatever it is, then we'd all run fine. There'd be no depression for some people. There'd be no bipolar disorder for other people. There'd be no hunger for other people. I mean, we would know these things. But there's a lot of differences in our physiology. So I don't know that if everybody lived without an eating, and I'm not saying an eating plan is good. I don't really believe that it is in a rigid sense. But some people may or may not biologically have a healthy sense of I'm hungry and a healthy sense of I'm full by nature. So if that's you, I don't know. Maybe or maybe not intuitive eating would work for you. You'd have to play with that a little bit. All right, a lot of people who diet have the fear that I'm going to be out of control. I've heard that forever, and I believe that that's very true for many, many people, that if left to my own devices, I'm going to be out of control with food. The authors of the intuitive eating book say the reality is control's not an issue in intuitive eating. Instead, it goes back to relying on those internal signals. And as you just heard me say, I'm not sure that everybody's internal signals are on cue, right? They're not balanced. So that could be an issue. The authors also mentioned something which I think is really, really a valid point, that if you've been a dieter for years or decades and you let go of the dieting mentality, which I think is good, but when that happens, you have what they refer to as the diet void, which means, and here's their words, when you say goodbye to the thrill and excitement of dieting, you'll also be letting go of the false hope and disappointments from dieting. Think about that. Every time you start a new diet, it's like, oh, this is going to be the one, and I can do this. And in that kind of thrill and excitement, if you let go of that, you're going to lose that thrill and excitement of the new hope, the hope for the next diet. You also let go of that false hope that this might be it, but also the disappointment. So there's a lifestyle, I don't want to say lifestyle, there's a mental way of living when you've been on diets and off diets and on diets and off diets, that I have this false hope. And it is a false hope that any diet is going to be the be-all and end-all answer. Because most diets that people go on are not sustainable. And so the hope that this is the answer is false. And that the same is true with weight loss surgery, by the way. Those people who come into the weight loss surgery process believing that this is the be-all and end-all, that the surgery is going to take care of everything, that is a false hope. Ask anybody who's been past surgery a couple of years, and they're going to tell you, yes, the surgery is going to help me get that weight off, but it is work to keep it off. So any kind of diet or miracle cure produces false hope. All right, so the authors, when they're talking about this diet void, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? This has taken up so much of my time. And here's how I describe it. I often ask people to put both hands up next to on the sides of their face by their eyes. So if you're watching this, you can see what I'm doing. But if you're listening, just imagine holding up your hands to the sides of your face like you have blinders on for your peripheral vision. And when you've been in diet mentality for so long, you have a direct line of sight for the next diet, the next diet, the next diet. And you're missing everything going on around you in life that is outside of your peripheral vision. So if you let go of that diet mentality, it's like, whoa, there's a whole lot more life out there. And that can be scary for some people. So they clap back on those blinders because they know how to live in the diet mentality world. And then they don't have to deal with an unhappy marriage or a poor childhood or a stressful job or whatever else might be going on out there. But they also miss out on all the amazing things they could be doing that have nothing to do with dieting. So the authors say there's a social element to dieting that you may miss. And they call this diet bonding, that you're bonded with this way of life of dieting. And we have to break that bond. And in intuitive eating, there is no place for diets. And that's why they say the principle one is get rid of this diet mentality. So they also say that the initial step, of course, to becoming an intuitive eater is to reject the diet mentality. And I am going to agree with them. And I'm going to share with you another thing that they write in the book is that studies, and this is interesting, and if you are a person who is having or has had bariatric surgery, I want you to listen especially closely to this next part, because a lot of people talk about how their self-esteem improves and they're out there and they're doing all these things after they lose weight and they're a new self and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here's what I want you to hear because this is important. All right, here's what's in the book. Studies have shown that improvements in psychological well-being associated with weight loss are just as temporary as the pounds lost and regained. The, quote, good feelings diminish with regained weight, and existing issues of self-worth and general psychological function return to initial levels when the weight is regained. And of equal importance, the authors note, a focus on weight loss and dieting only keep you stuck in the belief that your weight is a measure of who you are. Remember, you are much more than your weight. So what they're saying is, if you didn't feel good about yourself before you lose the weight in whatever form, there's going to be a point in time when you start to regain. If you start to regain, which let's face it, most people who diet and even with weight loss surgery, there's a little bit of rebound, and that's normal. But what happens is people start then, if they had these self-doubts, they start to doubt themselves again, and they start to bring in the mentality they had prior to the weight loss. So that woohoo, high on life kind of thing and high on myself kind of thing is temporary with weight loss if there's a regain. So be cautious of that. No diet, no weight loss surgery, no nothing is going to change that sense of well-being you have about yourself before the weight loss. It may be temporary, but you feel about yourself the way you feel about yourself. And at some point in time, when that honeymoon phase is over, some of that old feeling is going to creep back in. We don't automatically become perfectly psychologically sound because we lose weight. But some people think that is what happens, and it does not. It's temporary. All right. And your weight shouldn't determine your value to yourself as a human being anyway. But that's what dieting does. So I get what they're saying here. So I'm focusing a lot on this first principle because so many people that listen to this podcast are chronic dieters or have been over the years. And a lot of people go back to that chronic dieting mentality even after bariatric surgery. So we want to get rid of this, whether you believe in intuitive eating, whether you're trying to practice intuitive eating or not, because diet mentality is going to prevent you from growing as a human being. It's going to keep you stuck in a lot of ways. And also in this chapter, the authors talk about this thing of pseudo dieting. So you might say, well, I've given up dieting. But here's the deal. Even though you may say that, you still hang on to some of those dieting behaviors and some of that mentality. So here's some examples of pseudo dieting that they share, and I think this is true. It's kind of like it's a loophole. I say I'm not dieting, but I'm still doing this and I'm still doing that. And according to these dieters, if you want to engage in intuitive eating, these pseudo dieting behaviors have to go as well. And some of this might butt up against what you're learning as a bariatric patient, a person who's having a bariatric surgical procedure. So here's one of these pseudo dieting things that they talk about. Meticulously counting carb grams or macros. They say this is the modern version of counting calories. Okay, now, not that I disagree with let's get away from counting all the things. When you have bariatric surgery, they want to make sure you're getting enough protein to stay healthy. So are you going to give up counting the macros? Maybe making sure you don't go over a certain amount of sugar or a certain amount of added sugar or a certain amount of unhealthy, highly processed carbs? I don't know. I don't know. You have to decide that for yourself. But they say that this macro counting is pseudo dieting and it's got to go. They also say eating only safe foods has got to go. So in some programs, they don't say this, but I'm saying this, like Weight Watchers will give you like the 0-point foods. Those are safe foods, right? So their definition of safe foods is sticking with fat-free, carb-free, or low-calorie foods. And they say that's a form of dieting. Now, if you're a post-op, you are taught typically by the dietitian that if you engage in eating a lot of highly processed, high carb foods with very little nutritional value, that's probably not wise. I agree with that, and I agree with that for anybody. That's not exactly what they're saying here, but they're saying if you eat only safe foods, that's a dieting behavior. All right, another one is they say eating only at certain times of the day, whether or not you are hungry, is a pseudo-dieting behavior. So some people, they don't say this, I'm saying this, like intermittent fasting. They say that reality check, our bodies don't punch time clocks. We don't suddenly turn off our need for energy at certain times. So you're going to have to figure this one out for yourself. According to these authors, eating at certain times of the day has to go because it's a form of pseudo dieting. Now, as a bariatric patient, you are encouraged to eat every 3 to 4 hours. So does that mean that you're engaging in dieting behavior? Just presenting the info here, friends. All right. Pseudo-dieting behavior, according to the authors, that needs to go is paying penance for eating perceived bad foods. I think this is wise. We don't need to beat ourselves up for eating anything. We need to decide for ourselves whether this is something that's going to lead you to where you want to be or not. Another thing that has to go, according to the authors, is cutting back on food, especially if you are trying to lose a few pounds, they say, for these external things like an upcoming class reunion or a wedding. And they say this can result in undereating. And undereating, usually, according to the authors, leads to overeating. So this cutting back has to go. Pacifying hunger by drinking coffee or diet soda has to go. They consider that a pseudo-dieting behavior. Limiting carbs, they say, has to go. So they talk about people eat an inadequate amount of carbs like bread, pasta, rice because they're afraid they're going to lose weight. I agree that carbs are necessary. Absolutely. But is it wise or unwise to limit carbs? I don't know. You have to figure that out for yourself. But according to intuitive eating, that's got to go. And then putting on a false food face in public is when you eat really healthy in front of other people, but behind the scenes, you're doing your own thing. All right, so those are some pseudo kinds of things. One of the things that I struggle with in this book is they say, I'm going to read this whole paragraph because I don't want to misrepresent them, but they're saying it's a lifestyle, is a pseudo dieting behavior that has to go. So here's what they say. It's a lifestyle. Thanks to diet culture influence, we have worked with people who are counting or eliminating foods for the purpose and expectation of weight loss. But because they believe the rhetoric of it's a lifestyle, they don't view it as a diet. Counting macros is not a lifestyle. Counting points is not a lifestyle. Nice try, diet culture. We're on to you. Now, I talk about developing a healthy lifestyle all the time. And when I talk about developing a healthy lifestyle, I'm not talking about a lifestyle of counting macros. I'm not talking about a lifestyle of counting points. To me, a healthy lifestyle is balance in spending time with other people and making time for yourself. It's eating healthy foods most of the time and enjoying things that you enjoy that aren't so healthy on an occasion. It's about balance. Healthy lifestyle includes engaging in fun and engaging in work, finding a balance in your life, spending time with your partner and spending time with friends. So it depends on who you're using the word lifestyle, but according to these authors, saying it's a lifestyle in the context that they shared it is a pseudo dieting and needs to go. Then they explain this thing, and I think this is relevant to everyone who's had a dieting mentality. And we're almost finished with the first principle. So I'm guessing that this topic is going to take more than one episode of the podcast because there are 10 of these. And again, the other ones I don't go as much into detail because this one, eliminating the diet mentality, has so much pertinent information because so many people who have bariatric surgery or a surgical procedure related to weight loss really have lived a diet mentality. And I think diet mentality and diet culture are very harmful for all of us. They really keep us from living a full life. And they limit our view. Because living life and having food and weight and calories and grams and the scale at the center of your life is not living. It is living a diet. It's not how we want to live. So I am all 100% in favor of getting rid of a diet mentality for every human on the planet. All right, but I'm going to explain to you what they write about, what do they call it? The dieter's dilemma, and I agree. So I'm reading again, right from their book. The inherent futility of dieting is explained by a dieter's dilemma model created by psychologists John Forate and G. Ken Goodrick. The dieter's dilemma, here we go. This is what it is, and you're probably going to relate to this. The dieter's dilemma is triggered by the desire to be smaller, which is programmed by diet culture and leads to dieting. That's when the dilemma unfolds. Dieting increases cravings and urges for food. The dieter gives into the craving, overeats, and eventually regains lost weight. They're back to where they started with the original weight or higher. And once again, the dieter has the desire to shrink their body, and so another diet begins. The dieter's dilemma is perpetuated and gets worse with each turn of the cycle, making the dieter feel more out of control with food and eating. And I think that is true. So many of you have lived this dieter's dilemma, and it's a miserable way of living. And so many people want to get out of the dieting dilemma, the roller coaster, the yo-yo dieting, the weight loss followed by the regain with the accompaniment of friends, meaning additional pounds. People want to get away from this, but it's so programmed into them that, again, you can't snap your fingers and be over the diet mentality. This takes work, it takes effort, and I'm going to say it takes work with a professional. And here's the deal. If you're working with a dietitian, many of them perpetuate the diet mentality by putting you on a food plan. Many doctors perpetuate a diet lifestyle. Many psychologists perpetuate a dieting lifestyle. And I, according to this book, do the same. Because we do talk about in bariatric medicine, for people who have had a surgical procedure, the importance of eating on a regular schedule, the importance of eating a lot of protein. So in that regard, it's going completely against what the authors of this book say about intuitive eating. So you're going to have to figure out, can you incorporate an intuitive eating lifestyle based on hunger and internal cues, if your body's working correctly, and still have some of the aspects of what you're learning to do as a post-op patient. But let's get rid of this dieter's dilemma by constantly starting another new diet. So they say, how do you break the futile dieter's dilemma? And I quote, you must simply make the decision to let go of dieting. Okay, well, I'll just throw that one out and be done with it. It's not how it works. So simply making that decision, to me, is a fantasy. Working toward that goal is an absolute possibility and a reality for many people, but it's not going to happen overnight. So that was just the first principle of intuitive eating, and it's ditch the dieting mentality. So they go into how to reject it, and you can only do that, they say, by building a healthier relationship with food in your body. And I agree with that. They say that you have to recognize and acknowledge the damage that dieting causes. And I agree with that. If you've been nodding your head and shaking your head in agreement with a lot of what they've been proposing in this first chapter, it's not the first chapter of the book, it's the 6th chapter, but it's the first principle. You can recognize and acknowledge that there's some damage that's done through dieting. And there's a lot of research that shows the biological and emotional damage that dieting can do. And I'm going to note some of the things that they say. Not going to go into detail about these, but kind of just point them out. They say damage, biological damage and health-related issues from dieting. They say chronic dieting teaches the body to retain more fat when you start eating again. And I think that, with low-calorie diets, the body makes these enzymes, so they explain it a little bit. But I think I agree with that. Chronic dieting teaches the body to retain more fat when you start eating again. Dieting decreases metabolism. I believe that too, right? There's a lot of research on that. Dieting increases binges and cravings. I agree with that. Dieting increases the risk of premature death and heart disease. Now there's this whole group of studies that show that weight cycling or yo-yo dieting, people who have done that have an overall higher death rate and twice the normal risk of dying of heart disease. That's a pretty big, scary factor. And they also point out that dieting causes satiety cues to atrophy, meaning if you've been a chronic dieter, you lose the ability to tell when you're full or satisfied, not even full, just satisfied. You lose the ability, so you don't have those internal cues to say, enough. Dieting causes body shape to change. If you're a yo-yo dieter, you probably recognize that because fat storage is different with the chronic dieting. All right, so the authors say other documented side effects include headaches, menstrual irregularities, fatigue, dry skin, and hair loss. So those are the physiological damages from dieting, or at least some of them. Now here are some of the psychological and emotional things they point out that are damaging that come from dieting. Dieting is linked to eating disorders. Absolutely true. Dieting may cause stress or make the dieter more vulnerable to the effects of stress. True. Dieting is correlated with feelings of failure, lowered self-esteem, and social anxiety. Absolutely true. The dieter is often vulnerable to loss of control and overeating when violating the rules of the diet. All very true. Not to mention the high cost of false hope from dieting. People have this false hope that this is it. This is going to be the one and all, the be all and the end all. Ah, yes. But the truth is, all this dieting erodes your trust in yourself and your confidence because the diets don't work and then you don't trust yourself. Not a good thing. So be careful. Be careful with dieting. All right. They talk also about the rebelliousness, right? When you are on a diet, you want to be obedient, and that causes people to rebel. And they also say you need to get rid of the dieter's tools. And what they mean by dieter's tools, and they write it out here, is throw out your diet tools. Get rid of meal plans, get rid of tracking apps, and get rid of the scale. I don't know how that's going to sit with people, especially if you're new after having bariatric surgery, right? Because some people want to have a meal plan. Some people really use those tracking apps to keep track of what they're encouraged to by the bariatric dietitians. So I don't know if intuitive eating is going to completely work for new post-ops, but the first step of this, of course, is to get rid of the diet mentality. All right, so that's the first principle. All right, now I promise the next ones are going to go much more quickly because we're almost an hour into this episode, but that is an important principle. And I think a lot of that is absolutely appropriate to everybody who wants to get out of this crazy dieting lifestyle. But there are some issues that I think go against what you're taught as a post-op patient. So you're going to have to figure that out if you're wanting to become an intuitive eater. All right, principle 2 is to honor your hunger. And I think this is important, but this is assuming you have the internal cues of hunger. If you don't, well, I think you can work toward that as your body regulates, hopefully, after you have a more stable weight. But, all right. Because dieting, according to the authors, you have to honor your hunger. It says once you reach the moment of excessive hunger, like if you're dieting and you're like, oh my God, I'm hangry, I'm starving, all intentions of eating in moderation or conscious eating are thrown out the window. So you want to honor your hunger and not get to the point where you're absolutely starving, right? So we don't want to get to that point. And if you have had bariatric surgery, hopefully you won't get to that point because you are encouraged to eat every 3 to 4 hours, which means you're not going to go too long a period of time without fueling your body. So there's that. Here's what they have to say about, this biological fuse, they call it, that turns on our eating drive. That the hunger drive is really a mind-body connection, and I'm all about mind-body connection. And eating is so important to our our survival, that the nerve cells of appetite are located in the brain, a certain part of the brain, and a variety of biological signals trigger eating. So what many people believe to be an issue of willpower, according to the authors, is instead a biological drive. So you're like, I have no willpower. But maybe you've got this biological thing going on that's saying, you know what, you need to eat. So what they say is that the power and intensity of this biological eating drive shouldn't be underestimated. It's powerful, it's built into our systems, it's part body, part brain, part body, and the neurochemicals from the brain coordinate our eating behavior with our body's biological needs. So if your body is functioning right, your body's going to tell you, I need some fuel. And your brain is going to say, it's time to eat. But this is a really complex interplay between chemical signals, neurological, neural feedback, and the brain is monitoring all the needs of our body systems. And it's directly correlated with the chemicals in our body that say, I'm hungry. So if you're fasting or restricting, the authors are saying it's very counterproductive to appetite. So it turns on the neurochemical switches that induce you to eat if you're fasting and you're restricting food. So dieting, according to the authors, and they say many studies have shown that dieting makes no sense metabolically to our brain chemistry. In fact, it's counterproductive. And I think that a lot of people are aware of this because when they've dieted, it makes you really hungry, or maybe it shuts off your hunger sensations. If you go long periods of time and then you get overly hungry, then you overeat. So they say if you deny your true hunger, like if your tummy's rumbling and your brain is saying, I need some food, and you fight this and you don't give your body the nutrition that it needs, the stronger and more intense the food cravings and the obsessions become. And I think a lot of people have probably experienced that firsthand. So they're saying that fasting or restricting just revs up that body's desire to seek more carbohydrates. So by the time you allow yourself to eat, it can be really easy to fall into a high carb binge. So when you chronically diet, you lose this natural body rhythm that says, do you feel these hunger signals? And some people lose the intuition or the innate sense of, oh yeah, my stomach's grumbling, or they don't pay attention to it. They shut that off so intentionally that it messes up your metabolism and your ability to be in tune with these signals. Now this chapter goes into a whole bunch of stuff about carbs and keto and the powerhouse cell theory, and I'm not going to go there. But what they do talk about with this, they talk about how we second guess our biology. So we've got this system in place that we're supposedly born with to ensure that our bodies get enough energy when we're physically hungry, but dieters try to outthink their biology. So rather than eating when they're hungry, they eat in this cognitive set point. This is what I'm supposed to eat. This is what I'm not supposed to eat. This is what I'm supposed to eat. This is what I'm not supposed to eat. Do I deserve it? Is it carb-free? And we get all this craziness going on in your head. But when you constantly deny physiological hunger cues, it says, A, it's going to lead you to the overeating, which we talked about. And secondly, that your mind gets so used to ignoring these hunger signals that they fade. And if you've lost connection with your hunger signals, then it's impossible to intuitively eat. So you have to get back in tune with the rhythm of your body. And I can tell you that as a person who struggled with anorexia when I was in college, I lost my hunger cues. and it absolutely disrupted my mind, my physiology, my body. I quit having a period for probably a year. I was so constantly obsessing over food and calories and whatever that my mind and my body were not I was not living a full life in any way, shape, or form. So we can really mess with our body's way of telling us that we're hungry. So the second principle to becoming an intuitive eater is reclaim the world of normal eating, free of dieting, free of food worry, ha ha ha, and to honor your biological hunger. So you're going to have to get back in tune with, oh, this is what hunger feels like. Oh, I'm going to stop eating after this amount of food and let me see if I feel satisfied or if I'm still experiencing physiological hunger symptoms. Because a lot of dieting and food deprivation actually halt those normal biological sensations. So sometimes here they give some reasons for people silencing those hunger cues, right? So it says, what if you don't feel hungry more, never really knew what that gentle sensation of hunger feels like? Can you get it back? So the good news is, if you've lost that, they're saying you can get this back, but they're showing reasons why your hunger cues may have been silenced. So maybe it's been numbing. You've learned to numb your feelings of natural hunger by drinking the diet sodas, by drinking coffee, by drinking tea, because the liquid in the stomach tricks, they say, the gastric mechanism into a sense of fullness. So you put a bunch of liquid in your belly and you don't feel the hunger. So numbing your chemistry can shut you down from recognizing hunger. Dieting. They say dieters get so used to denying their hunger that you can easily turn it out. Here's an interesting one. Chaos. You can suppress hunger or ignore it when you're busy putting out fires in your life. I didn't have time to eat. My job is so chaotic. My job requires that I'm hands-on, for 6 hours in a row and I can't pay attention. So if that's the truth, then your hunger sensations may gradually fade until you're not so busy, then all of a sudden you're ravenous and you do the overeating thing. That's why I think for bariatric patients it's really important to at least get in a protein bar or a protein drink, so you don't get that ravenous hunger. Also, check this out. A trauma history can silence your hunger cues, because in order to feel your body's natural sensations, you've got to feel safe. And if you have a history of trauma, maybe you've eaten to feel better, but you lose that signal. So if you're an emotional eater, if you're trying to calm your emotions through food, maybe you don't know when you're hungry or when you're not. A lot of this stuff, my friends, in order to overcome it, you need to work with, a therapist or a trauma specialist or somebody who has a lot of training in working with people who maybe have been anorexic and have shut off their hunger cues. Skipping breakfast, my friends. Oh my gosh, probably 3/4 of the people I've worked with over the past 20 years are not breakfast eaters, right? But skipping breakfast, because people will say, it keeps me from feeling hungry the rest of the day. So people think if I don't eat breakfast, I'm not going to feel hunger. But hunger is normal. You're supposed to recognize your hunger. You're supposed to pay attention to that. You don't want to shut it off. But a lot of people are so afraid of that feeling of hunger, especially because now I'm getting really hungry in the evening because they didn't eat earlier in the day. Then you have that vicious cycle. I don't eat breakfast because I'm trying not to be hungry, but then I'm just really hungry. In the evening, I'm especially hungry, and it's a very bad cycle. So not eating breakfast shuts off that awareness of the hunger. And stress, biological stress, if you have a lot of stress, and who doesn't, right, can cause a temporary, what they say, blunting in that sense of hunger. So you've got to learn how to honor and be aware. I talk about how awareness is always the key, the first step in change. So you've got to start to listen for the hunger and work with somebody. You know, if you start feeling, you know, you hear the growling noises or the gurgling, or you start feeling a little lightheaded, or you're not concentrating really well, or you start to feel hangry, that irritability or faint or have a headache, it might be that you're hungry. Now, here's a little thing that I find not consistent in their book. And I know that they could explain this in a way that would make sense. But here they say a general guideline is to go no longer than 5 waking hours without eating. But what if you're not hungry? Or what if you're hungry before that? So I don't understand what that means with them. But as they post-op, because you're eating so little food at one time, they say 3 to 4 hours. So I don't know. They say don't have time limits, but here they're kind of saying don't go more than 5 hours. So I just think that is smart, not to go too long. And they say check in with your body at regular intervals and just kind of say, am I experiencing hunger signals right now? And start to learn again what it feels like. So they kind of talk about how to pay attention to your hunger. And it says there are other voices of hunger that you need to be aware of. Sometimes you just have a hunger for a certain taste, but your body might not be physically hungry. You know, I just kind of like, I would like to have some of that whatever right now. So sometimes you just want to eat because it sounds good, and that's called taste hunger. It might not be a huge violation to eat when you're not, but there is taste hunger. I just want that. Or there's practical hunger. I'm planning ahead. It's time to eat, right? Whether or not you're hungry. So there's also emotional hunger, and we're all very familiar with emotional hunger. I'm feeling emotions. I don't want to feel this emotion, so I'm going to eat. And the food will give me some dopamine, and I will be distracted from the feeling that I don't want to feel. So this isn't, it sounds kind of complicated, but again, if you want to be an intuitive eater, remember that there are 3 basic principles, and intuitive hunger is learning to trust your body and listen for the hunger cues. And the 3 key features are permission to eat when you're hungry and eat what you want when you're hungry, eating for physical reasons rather than emotional, and relying on your internal cues rather than, you know, external. Everybody's eating, so I'm going to eat too. All right, we're going to zip through these next 7 in the next episode of BariAftercare, the podcast. This is fascinating and important information. Again, I think we're all born with the ability to be intuitive eaters. I think especially people who have dieted or have had an eating disorder have really lost touch with their internal eating cues. We have to learn to get that back. So we're going to go on and talk about the other 8 principles of intuitive eating according to the book, The 10 Principles of Intuitive Eating. No, that's not the book. That's the name of this podcast. The book is called Intuitive Eating, A Revolutionary Anti-Diet Approach, 4th edition by Evelyn Tribole and Elyse Resch. So you might want to read the book. You might want to spend some time as you follow your bariatric guidelines. If you have had a surgical bariatric procedure, I absolutely encourage you to follow what your bariatric dietitian and your surgeon are telling you, because that is very well researched and appropriate for persons who have had a surgical bariatric procedure. You want to do that. And in doing that, maybe pay attention to when that 3 or 4 hours is up, saying, am I aware of any hunger signals? Or if you have hunger signals in between, talk to your dietitian and say, what do you suggest doing about that? So getting that information. But we want to fuel your body with healthy foods, especially as a post-op, because you need to get every ounce of healthy nutrition that you can. So you want to follow what your bariatric dietitian tells you rather than trying to jump into this intuitive eating until you're more acclimated to your new body. All right, so that's what I'm going to say about that today. Great information. I appreciate the information in this book. You're going to have to figure out what works for you, but first and foremost, follow through with your bariatric center, your bariatric dietitian, all right, as a post-op. All right, I look forward to seeing you next time. So tune into your body, focus in on that awareness, and we will meet again next time. Share this with other people, whether they've had surgery or not, because intuitive eating may be something your friend or neighbor might want to try. All right, my friends, thanks for being with me. We will meet again soon. Check out the full BariAftercare program. We got a lot of great things coming for the new year too. All right, bye-bye.